I kind of walked away. I told him, I was gonna go get a drink of water real quick, and all I hear is like, "Yo, stop it!" And one of his lifelong friends was actually sitting right next to him, and he just started watching dude take off on him with the curl bar, hit him about 5 times in the head. I run back. Everyone else is running away. Even his childhood friend was running away, and oh yeah, in Hutchinson, they're terrible. They have a bed bug infestation. I have scars all over my arms, just from the bed bug bites. And there's one point I had at least maybe 50 bed bug bites on one arm and about 50, 75 on the other arm. Like, it was a bad infestation. And
So Deshaun, you're out here, you're working out, and this dude walks up. You walk away from working out with your workout partner, get a drink. Dude walks up and hits him in the back of the head with what, a curl bar?
yeah, the little 5 pound easy curl bar. Yeah, and I kind of walked away. I told him, I was gonna go get a drink of water real quick, and all I hear is like, "Yo, stop it!" And one of his lifelong friends was actually sitting right next to him, and he just started watching dude take off on him with the curl bar, hit him about 5 times in the head. I run back. Everyone else is running away. Even his childhood friend was running away, and I was the only one that really went back and helped him. Blood was gushing out of his head, and I got it all over my shirt. Then someone ran inside and told the COs, and they ambulanced him out. They had to bring the ambulance on the yard. He was in a coma for about 2 months, but he made a full recovery now. So thankful for that.
What was that like for you to see something like that?
Me, I was only 23 years old at the time, first time ever being in prison. So it was honestly pretty traumatic just because, I didn't really grow up, in a hood or, living a gangster lifestyle. So, seeing stuff like that is definitely pretty traumatic.
Let's talk about why you end up going to prison, Deshaun. Why do you end up in prison?
Yeah, I was selling weed in Kansas, nothing on a, crazy scale. I just had like a pound or two at a time, and I ended up getting raided by the DEA for, for 2 pounds of weed because the town I live in, Manhattan, Kansas, called them for assistance because, I had 2 pounds of weed, so they kicked down my door, guns blazing, had the ARs with the green lasers on them, arrested me. I was on bond for about 2 years, worked the job, didn't get in no trouble. This is the first time I've ever been in trouble in my entire life. And they gave me an 8-year prison sentence for possession of marijuana with the intent to distribute.
It's kind of like a joint task force. The DEA, the Kansas Police Department, they bust you. So you don't go to the feds, you actually go to a state prison in Kansas.
Yeah, Hutchinson Correctional Facility in Kansas.
How old are you at the time, Deshaun, when you do get arrested?
I was 19.
18 years old, and they got like this, what, big investigation on you for a couple pounds of weed?
Yeah, that's just how Kansas is when it comes to marijuana. I guess they're pretty harsh when it comes to that.
You end up getting arrested, never really been in trouble before. How do you feel when they arrest you? Are you like, oh shit, I'm in big trouble? I mean, how are you feeling inside?
Yeah, when I got arrested and they, put me in cuffs so they could execute the search warrant, they take me out in the police department, put me in the holding cell. I fall asleep there because it was about 2, 3 hours go by as they're doing the warrant and everything. And then the police come inside the holding cell. They flash the DEA badge, said, yeah, we're in cooperation with the Riley County, which is Manhattan Police Department, this and that. We've been collecting evidence for X amount of time. And, I didn't tell them nothing. I just said I wanted a lawyer because, I'm smarter than that, even me not, being in trouble at all. I knew better than to, say something potentially incriminating in a holding cell.
Eventually plead guilty, or do you go to trial?
Well, that's the thing, that they weren't giving me any plea deals whatsoever. The first plea deal they gave me was 144 months, and I wasn't taking that. And then the second one was 8 years. It was about 96 months. and I didn't want to take that either. So it was either do that or go to trial, and I just didn't want to go to trial. So they gave me an open sentencing plea, and the prosecutor almost guaranteed that I'd get a downward departure, which, at most maybe 2 years in prison, maybe probation, since I was a first time offender. Like I said, never been in trouble before. So I took the open sentencing plea, hoping for a departure and potentially, be at the judge's discretion and get that, probation or potentially just 2 years. And then, I had 12 character witnesses come to the stand, speak on my behalf, how, I was just a 19-year-old kid, never been in trouble, just had some weed, something that's legal in most of the United States at that time I got arrested. And the judge wasn't trying to hear it, gave me a 92 months prison sentence for marijuana. That's about 7.5 years.
I mean, when he imposes a 92-month sentence, you're just a young kid. What does it feel like for you? Are you just like in shock?
Yeah, well, yeah, I was definitely in shock. Definitely feeling like, man, I was on bond for 2 years. So when I got sentenced, I was 21. I'm like, I'm going to be about 30 years old by the time that I get out of prison. I'm just going through my head like, man, I just really just lost all my 20s. Just it was hard, having to hug my grandma after I got sentenced to so long, knowing that, this might be it. I might not see a lot of my family members again.
So you get this big sentence. Do you pay a lawyer, or I mean, was it a public defender, paid lawyer?
Yeah, I paid my lawyer about 10,000.
The lawyer's telling you, don't worry, you're going to get probation.
Yeah, yeah, he told me that, I've done with marijuana cases so much because, on his side where he's from, he's next to the Colorado Kansas border. So he represents people all the time to get caught crossing the border because, it's legal in Colorado, but in Kansas it's not legal. So he does marijuana cases quite often. So he said, yeah, someone just got caught with 66 pounds. He got a year probation. You're going to be good. Just take this. And, I trusted his word because, he knows more than me at the end of the day. And it just didn't work out like he thought it would. And he actually ended up retiring because he said, my case was a last straw for him. He just, it was just such a harsh sentence. He's never seen that before. And he didn't want to do private law anymore.
So you get smashed, right? Your parents, what are your parents thinking?
Yeah, one of the hardest things is, having to call my mom because, she actually wasn't able to make it to the sentencing. And, she was optimistic. Like, she kept texting me saying, yeah, when get probation, we can go out, finally put this behind us. And then, when before the transport got to the courthouse to take me to the jail, I had to call her. I was in cuffs, but I had to have the police officer dial the number for me so I could tell her the news. And when I told her I got a almost 8 year prison sentence, she just broke down crying, and it was pretty hard for me.
What was your life like, though? I mean, growing up, because you said you weren't from a bad neighborhood, you only got a couple pounds of weed. What was your life like?
Just going to school, really. I was kind of that chubbier kid. In school, kind of got picked on a little bit. Stuff like that. Real big into video games. And just, marijuana, it helped me at a young age kind of, not care what people say about me. I could just smoke. I had real bad anxiety, helped me with my anxiety, stuff like that. So honestly, I was about seventh grade when I first picked up smoking marijuana.
You're smoking weed, but why do you got the 2 pounds? Are you hustling a little bit, making a couple dollars? Are you growing
Yeah,
it?
I was about to go to school at K State after I graduated from Junction City High. So I was just honestly trying to fund a little bit, without going too crazy, fund my way into school and maybe, be able to pay for this and that, just kind of be comfortable while I try to complete college.
So that don't work out. You end up going to a different kind of college. You go to a prison, right? And
Yeah,
while
most
you
definitely.
when you get there, what's it like for you? What's your first day like in a Kansas prison? Because I know there was some violence there, right?
Yeah, most definitely. My first day, I was kind of just scoping the area and stuff like that, trying to see, what the in and outs are. Actually, my first meal when we get to the chow hall, yeah, I just sit down at a random table, and like I said, me being biracial, there's no like biracial in prison. You're either black, you're white, you're Mexican. So I'm just sitting at this table and this black guy, he pulls up on me. Hey, this is a sex offender table right here. We sit over here in the back. So I'm like, oh, okay, my bad. Switch seats. I'm like, man, because that's honestly like some TV stuff you might see happen on TV. So I'm like, man, are the TV shows like right? Like, I just got pulled up on because I was sitting at the wrong table, stuff like that.
Are you a little bit nervous walking in there?
Yeah, yeah, I was definitely a little bit nervous. Even if it was a minimum camp, it's still a prison system, and there's still stuff you gotta watch out for.
So it's a minimum, but there's violence there?
Yeah, most definitely. It's probably one of the most negligent places I've ever been in my life, just in terms of the conditions and the guards, and just no one really cares about anything. We pretty much run every aspect of that place.
Let's go back to your boy, right? Your boy gets hit with this bar. You're working out with him. White dude, black dude.
It was another black dude.
Who did they hit him for?
I don't know. Honestly, the dude that hit him, he was kind of a fiend. He was up for like 4 or 5 days off some meth, and then he smoked K2, and I guess that's just not a good combination. So he started tripping and thinking people are out to get him.
Wax your boy. There's blood everywhere. How old are you? You 22 at the time?
I
21?
was 23 at the time. Yeah.
23 years old and you witness this. Does it mess you up in your head? Or are you like, wow, I better, keep my head on a swivel or what?
Yeah, it definitely, made me realize that I can't never get too comfortable, no matter who you're with or what you think you might got going on, or how good of a dude you are, all it takes is someone, doing the wrong combination of drugs and, you could go down that same path that he did. So definitely made me keep my head on a swivel a little bit.
You ever think you could become a victim in there?
Oh, 100%, because I was sitting in that chair that he was sitting in a minute before this happened. I just finished my workout and got up to get water, and he sat down. So if there was like maybe a minute or two different time difference between me getting out of that chair and him sitting down in it, that could have been me with my head busted open.
Do you ever think that, hey man, I gotta get a weapon now in here?
No, I mean, really, weapons weren't that common in there. It was just we had free weights. So, that just made it kind of easy for people to kind of pick things up and hit people with them. Because like, we had easy, dumbbells, not welded together, weights to slide on and off.
So after you see your boy get hit, you see any other type of violence over there in Kansas?
Yeah, just fights, just fights within gangs, stuff like that. Yeah, it's an everyday thing. Someone's fighting over some deuce or fighting over, someone not giving them their shredded beef or just little petty things. I've seen people fight over, oh, you said you were gonna smoke this tap with me and you lied, so we got to get down now.
Did you ever have any type of physical altercations in there yourself?
No, no, me. I just, I worked they had outside jobs there at the minimum, so most of the time I just got to go out into the world and work at a honey factory.
Honey factory?
Yeah, yeah, the biggest manufacturer of honey in the United States. Yeah, they hire inmates. All the Walmart Great Value honey bottled by inmates. All the what Busy Bee brand is bottled by inmates. So, we do a large majority of the honey that comes it's in supermarkets in the United States.
How much are they paying you as an inmate to work at an actual factory?
It was like 14.50, but the prison takes 50% of your check, so you're really only making like $7.
Oh, so they're paying you 14.50 an hour and bringing the inmates in there to work.
Yep, yep.
I mean, it doesn't sound like that bad of a job though. If you're in prison, right?
Yeah, most definitely not. We were segregated, so we had to stay on our own section. So it's not like seeing women every day or anything, but getting paid 14, $15 an hour, no matter if the prison takes 50% of it or not, it's still money. If you have some years, it's just nice to be able to save up.
What's the food like over there?
Just carbs, pasta. I don't know if you're familiar with the beaver tail. Disgusting. I don't even know what it is. It's just like a beef patty with who knows what kind of meat that has little lines in it like a beaver tail.
Okay,
So
so
it's just
the mystery meat. I do know what you're talking about. We didn't call it beaver tail. We called it mystery meat.
yeah, it was definitely, pretty disgusting. And I said just pasta, anything, with carbs so they can try to fatten you up, stuff like that.
How? Wow. What's the commissary like though? Because I mean, you guys are making money. I mean, commissary is probably
Yeah.
nice, right?
It was all right, but when I was in there, it got so expensive to a point where, it just wasn't worth buying. Cause like about, let's say a year ago when I was still in there, they raised everything by like 300%. A bag of pork rinds was $1. It's about $5 now. Let's see, a summer sausage was $1.50. Now it's $3.75. A pack of sardines was $1.09. Now it's 2.50. And yeah, they just raised everything by like 300%. And yeah, it just kind of got not worth buying anymore.
They figured, hey, you guys are getting that honey money. We might as well get it every way, 50%, and get it back from you on commissary.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, it was then they try to justify it by, oh well, the prices of stuff out there are expensive now, but a bag of sardines, like, I don't see anywhere that's $3. Honestly, that's like the cheapest food source ever. Like a sardine is everywhere.
How much time do you do total out of that sentence?
About 2.5 years. They said I got a pardon by the governor of Kansas.
Oh, so you would have done what, 7 or 8 out of it? What would you have done?
I would have done, yeah, 7.5.
End up getting a pardon by the governor. How's that happen?
When I was in the reception and diagnostics units in El Dorado, Kansas, I was just kind of going through all the options I could potentially get out early. Like, I'm going through everything that I possibly can to where, I want to get out early. I don't want to do this full time. So someone told me about a clemency, and which is where it's an application you send to the governor of the state you're in, and she can review it and potentially let you out early, commute your sentence. So I fill that out, when I'm in the RDU they call it, and I turn it in and I wait, and I get to Hutchinson, do my time there, and I'm waiting and waiting, and then I come across someone in there. His name's Antonio Wyatt, and he was telling me he was in prison for marijuana too. And he told me about this group, the Last Prisoner Projects. And he said that his boy Dante, Dante West, he is helping him get out early. So he put me on with them. We got connected, and he told me that he's gonna get me out. He told me just to wait, and I'm just sitting there waiting, and then eventually, Toriano Porter from the Kansas City Star, makes an article about me and everything, of why I deserve, to get out early and not do my whole sentence. So that gets the attention of the governor's office. So because he contacted them, and they start reviewing my clemency application and everything. And then through the Last Prisoner Project, I actually, was able to get pro bono legal representation from Barry Grissom, and he used to be the United States District Attorney for the state of Kansas and Missouri. He's since retired, but he takes on marijuana cases, tries to help people get out early, and he picked up the case. And about almost 2.5 years into my sentence, I ended up getting a meeting over Zoom with the governor of Kansas's chief legal counsel, and they were pretty much just asking me questions about my case, trying to see if I'm remorseful or not. But it was a good interview. Barry Grissom was on the interview as well. And, the interview went well, and they told me to wait. And, that was in October. No, that was in August that I had that interview. And then in November, about 2 months later, a day after the presidential election where Trump wins, I get a letter from the legal assistant of the prison, pretty much the attorney of the prison, hand delivering me a letter saying, yeah, congratulations. The governor of Kansas commuted your sentence. This doesn't happen often. So, take your opportunity and don't mess it up.
Pack your shit up right there and leave that day?
Yeah, well, they made me stay an extra 30 days because they needed to figure out my parole and stuff. Because all she did was revert my time to time served. So I still had to do my post release time. But, 30 days, I'm like, I'll do 30 days. I had about 4 or 5 years left. So I would definitely, wasn't mad about that at all.
We talked a little bit before the interview about the living conditions there in Kansas, right? What's it like? What are the living conditions like in Kansas, bro?
Oh yeah, in Hutchinson, they're terrible. They have a bed bug infestation. I have scars all over my arms, just from the bed bug bites. And there's one point I had at least maybe 50 bed bug bites on one arm and about 50, 75 on the other arm. Like it was a bad infestation, and they'll come through and spray bleach or something on them, and they'll tell the public, yeah, yeah, we spray for bed bugs every day, but they're pretty much just spraying like sugar water because every time they spray something down there, they just spread out, go to a different bunk. Like they aren't hiring any outside exterminator to do anything about this. People are getting bit. People are still getting bit by bed bugs in Hutchinson Correctional Facility right now as we speak. Like it's a problem. They just honestly just need to move those guys somewhere else. That's how bad it is. Like there's bed bugs in the walls, in the bunks. Like they're everywhere. I didn't seen someone put their blanket in the laundry and there's 500 bed bugs. There's a whole nest on this guy's blanket.
A whole nest? What's
Yeah,
going
there
on?
was there was about 500. I'm like the blanket was white, but there was a big section that was just brown and moving.
And what? You dudes ain't pushing back on the staff, like in the administration, like, yo, this something has to happen here?
Yeah, we do. People actually, I don't know what you guys call it when you were incarcerated, but the to the little unit counselors, we call them Form Nines. So people are filling out Form Nines and taping bed bugs to the Form Nines and sending them to the unit team. And they told us to stop doing that. Because the unit teams didn't want bed bugs sent to them. Well, we didn't want bed bugs either. People, they complain. They called the health department. There's families called the health department. People's called central, central inmate thing, central office. Sorry, in Topeka, which is the central office for KDOC, and they refuse to do anything about it. They're pretty much just trying to sweep this under the rug and make these guys still locked up there at South Unit of Hutchinson Correctional Facility to deal with these bed bugs. Like they're refusing to do anything. And their best answer is, well, we're about to build a new facility in about 5 years, so we don't want to do anything. But these people are getting bit every day by these, going to sleep every night in a prison dorm, having to worry about bugs crawling on you, sucking your blood.
Should definitely be suing them. Earlier you had spoke about, look, I'm biracial, I get to prison, pretty much I have to choose, right? You have to choose a side. What side do you choose?
I was just with the brothers. I was going to La Rastafarian church a little bit, just because I lived with my dad. For a big portion of my life. My dad was black, so yeah, I just was with them, going to La Rastafarian church and everything.
So where'd you live with your dad? In
Yep,
Boston?
yep.
What's that like for you, living with your dad in Boston?
It was good, honestly. It's a little bit. It was a little bit different than living with my mom because they're just more that a father can show you what to do in terms of becoming a man, stuff like that. So it definitely learned a lot of good life skill. It gave me a lot of game that I still carry with me to this day.
What did your dad do for a living?
He's a debt collector actually.
Okay, don't give him my number. But anyway, no, I'm joking. Oh, so you end up choosing that side. Are the white dudes when you first come in there? Do they act like they want to accept you, or
No, honestly, they weren't just because I already had dreads in there and stuff like that. So, it was definitely definitely kind of strange because they're like, "Oh, who's that white guy with dreads?" That's kind of weird. But like I said, the blacks, they're the first person to pull up on me. Tell me, "Hey, this is the sex offender table. Don't sit here." And ever since that day, we were just cool.
I mean, you got blonde hair, blue eyes. The white dudes think you're white. They don't know you're biracial.
Yeah, definitely, definitely had to get my dad to send me a picture of me and him together. It's like, yeah, this is my dad. Look, yo, I'm not on no games.
Let's talk a little bit about gangs over there. I mean, how serious is the gang thing in Kansas?
Hutchinson is a, it's a Crip camp. The Crips run Hutchinson. You got the Crips and the GDs are the biggest, two gangs in that whole prison.
Are they really making any noise though? I mean, are they pushing the line? What are they doing over there?
Yeah, it's South Union. Like I said, it's a minimum camp, so there's really not much you can do. But behind the walls in Hutchinson Correctional Facility in the Max, yeah, they definitely make a lot of noise. There's a lot of COs getting beat up, and honestly, like being back there, the COs treat you with more respect than they do at the South Unit, because at the South Unit, people got jobs in the world, got girlfriends, they're making good money, they really don't want to mess that up, you feel me? And in the Max and Hutch behind the walls, these guys don't have nothing but the walls. So they're pressing more of a hard line on terms of we're gonna get treated with respect. And if you don't, we're gonna trick you off. Like, you're gonna get hit with the fan motor or something. So honestly, there's just a little bit more active behind the walls.
How long you been out now? A few months?
Yeah, 3 months. So actually, what is it? It's almost a six, almost 4 months. So I got out December 6th, 2024.
What are your plans moving forward with your life? You done with the weed?
Yeah, probably done with the weed, at least selling it. When I get off parole, probably move to a legal state, so I don't have to worry about, anything like this happening again.
Where are you at now? Are you in Kansas or are you in Boston?
Yeah, I'm in Kansas right now since I had to stay here for my parole and everything. Back in Manhattan, Kansas. I'm just being an advocate, trying to fight for people, in the community. Because, I don't know if you saw on my Instagram, but, a CBD shop here in Manhattan got raided by the police. They took all his legal CBD and Delta 8 products, which is legal under the Farm Bill. So I did a little interview with him. I'm really just trying to spread awareness on, how barbaric Kansas is with these marijuana laws and everything. It's just not right that we're sending, I was only 19. I was on bond for 2 years, got sentenced to 8 years. And the same judge that sentenced me, there was this other kid, in Manhattan, different race than me. He was drunk driving. He killed 3 people and he only got 2 years of probation. And the same judge that sentenced him, gave me 8 years in prison for, marijuana, and he gets to walk free. He killed 2 people drunk driving, but I had to do almost a decade because I had marijuana, something that doesn't kill anybody.
Man, that's crazy. Same. So the judge kind of a racist judge.
Yeah, most definitely. And there was another guy in Manhattan, older guy, 100 counts of child pornography, gets 2 years probation. And I'm the outlier, I guess, because I had the marijuana, so I'm the bad guy.
Absolutely disgusting. Horrible judge, man. Horrible, horrible judge. So you working now? What are you doing with your life? You living with your mom?
No, actually, I live by myself now. Got this apartment last month. Just working at the Chinese restaurant here in Manhattan that I worked for while I was on bonds. They were, my boss. He wrote to the governor as well. Because in the clemency, you have to have people like write support letters and send them to the governor. So my boss at the Chinese restaurant wrote one. And actually, Melissa Etheridge. I don't know if you're familiar with Melissa
The
Etheridge.
singer?
Yeah, the country singer, she wrote a letter to the governor of Kansas on my behalf too.
She your aunt or something? How'd you get her to write you a letter?
With the Last Prisoner project, they have a lot of, celebrity support, and with the Etheridge Foundation, she was able to hear about my case, and she wrote a letter. I still have the letter actually. I could send it to you maybe over Instagram or something. But yeah, she sent a letter to the governor for me. I feel like that helped me a lot too.
That's what's up, man. You're working at a Chinese restaurant. I mean, are you up there chefing that shit up or what?
Nah, I'm just a delivery driver. Just make decent money delivering, driving around. Don't have someone breathing down my neck. So yeah, it's really just a pretty cool job. Just drive around, listen to music, and make money.
Let me ask you something, Deshaun. How old are you now?
I'm 24 now. I turned 25 here in June, so it's coming up soon.
What are your goals though in life? It's not to work at the Chinese restaurant for the rest of your life, right?
No, and I'm hoping that, I can get into the legal, cannabis industry, hopefully, just kind of keep sharing my story, and hopefully one day, I'll be blessed, because I just feel like, the people like me, like, the people who are selling the plant really deserve to have a shot to be in the industry, because, at the end of the day, we're kind of like the pioneers. We're the people that were doing this when this was illegal, and got people to see the good in the plant. And, some of these states are legal because certain people get caught in situations that the states have a conversation like, wow, well, maybe we should make this legal. Maybe this isn't too bad. So I feel people like me and other people in prison for cannabis really deserve to have our foot in the industry.
Listen, they got a big event happening in DC in the middle of April. I can send you over the details, man, if you want to go, and I can hook you up with the right people. That's if you want to go.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm actually going to DC at the end of April, April 29th, for the Unity Day, and Unity Week that they're having down there. I'm gonna be outside the White House on May 1st, with some other people that were in prison for cannabis, kind of just trying to plead for other people, to get released.
that's what's up. Well, listen, man, definitely appreciate you coming on. Before we go, is there anything you want to say?
I just want to say that, Hutchinson Correctional Facility, bed bugs, infestation, they don't do anything about it. And hopefully I can keep advocating and sharing my story, and we can get marijuana legalized in Kansas, or maybe even federally. So yeah, that's really all I have to say. I appreciate you letting me on here, share my story and everything like that.
Listen, man, definitely appreciate you. I'm going to tell people if you like what we're doing, hit that like button with respect. Blood on the Razor Wire TV. Until tomorrow, we're out.